I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, August 5th, 2019 to order. Our first order of business, though, is a public hearing to obtain comment. But is there a motion to reverse 1 and 2 on our agenda?
So moved.
Call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 1 is now Pledge of Allegiance. Charlie?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Charlie. Item 2, public hearing to obtain comment on ordinance to amend the code of Town of Guilford, Chapter 218, regarding peddling and soliciting. Pam, you want to just come on up? This is something that has been kicking around for a couple of years. I understand it was started a few years ago.
2016, I think.
Yeah, so Charlie, you may be more familiar with this than anybody else, but this is an attempt for us to clean up our code relative to peddling and soliciting. Pam?
Right. As in 2016, we worked closely with the police chief, who is momentarily going to be here for any questions. So there were a few things that had to be brought to upgraded here. We wanted to bring all the statutory references so that they're consistent with the statutes. We wanted to have due process and appeal and notice rights if you revoke a license, which I thought was very important. It wasn't in the prior one. Just like the previous one, there is a provision that the chief of police, I think with the advice of his commission, can create rules and regulations, more detailed things that can change over time and a little more flexible, so they're not built into the ordinance. So there are really two documents. One is the rules and regs that were also established in conjunction with this ordinance, and these rules and regs will now supersede the previous rules and regs that the police had issued. Generally, we've required a license for whether it's peddling, soliciting, or hawking. It's a uniform license. There he is.
Morning, Chief.
Good morning.
You must have moved it up.
Yeah, come
It's
have a
actually,
seat. So I was just telling him, generally what we did. We've been working together. We're, bringing the defined terms up to speed with the statutes. We are trying to have a uniform requirement of a license that applies to all three activities. That we changed we created due process for if a license is revoked. There are some statutes that weren't referenced in the prior one, such as, veterans, get a waiver of the fee. And then we created the rules and regs, which will be, the Board of Selectmen upon the recommendation of the Chief of Police. And the Police Commission also gets to weigh in, which they did, correct?
At the July meeting, yeah.
Okay. In the rules and regs, just moving over to that, there are a couple things. You'll see that there's a reference to not peddling or soliciting within 300 feet of the school property. That was something that we had worked at the time with the superintendent of schools, coming up with that distance, and the police. Although he or she could waive that requirement of 300 feet. There's also some details about the mobile food establishments, where you're going to keep your garbage, where you're going to put your license on that's clearly visible, power source requirements, signage, awnings, and umbrellas, making sure they don't spread out completely, more contained within their mobile food establishment. Deliveries, you can't have a delivery in the middle of the street. Lighting and sound requirements. Traffic safety, which probably speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, really, the most important thing is to make sure that if they're undertaking their sales, they don't want to do it in a way that's going to be unsafe for pedestrians or other motorists. So we set it up so that they're not doing it on the roadside of the vehicle if they have it parked there. They don't want, we're not going to have a drive-up service on Park Street.
Window.
It's
Right.
really what we want to avoid.
All right. And then, we learned through the process, if you have a mobile food establishment on a state highway, that there's, state laws, you need an encroachment permit from the DOT. So that's kind of referenced there for the benefit of everyone, just to almost educate people that that's what you would need. And then finally, in the rules and regs, which again is a flexible document, can be revised at any point. We are creating what we're calling preferred peddler vending locations, so it's not mandatory. And basically, within our within our code, there are different governing agencies for different properties that the town owns, and the Board of Selectmen is the governing agency of town parking lots and parking areas. So what we're saying here is that the town parking lots at Jacobs, Chittenden, Chaffinch, Lake Quantapug, Bittner, Town Hall, Marina, and Guilford Lakes Golf Course are what we're going to call preferred peddler vending locations. And we're being very specific. They can only be in a certain area designated in any of those lots. It's first come, first serve. You can't reserve your area by putting a piece of personal property or vehicle there.
Milk crates.
And depending on the situation, site plan approval may be needed. So again, more for education, you need to really go over to Town Hall South if you were a mobile food establishment to try to determine what you need from that point of view. And that's it.
Is there any consideration, or has there been any consideration for trash responsibility? I mean, we have such an issue with the green and that type of thing. I mean,
Yeah, that's
does
covered.
that make sense to write into this? Or?
Yeah, it's in the rules and regs. Yeah, that is one of the elements. We got into a lot of detail with, how they're operating. Actually, yeah.
And they have to take it with them, or do we have to?
Well, it doesn't specifically state that they have to take it with them. It talks about their refuse collection and that they're not setting up their own system of garbage cans. It has to be connected to their cart. So if someone buys something from one of the food vendors and they walk down the green and have a seat and eat, obviously they're not gonna walk back to the food vendor.
I can appreciate that, and we've addressed that with Park and Rec. That's been an ongoing discussion this summer about trash on the green, but I'm talking, especially when you talk about these preferred parking lot areas, I don't want to multiply a problem. It sounds like you've considered it,
Yeah.
but
and-
I'm concerned
And now,
about it.
I'll read, adequate provision, so this is a responsibility for them. Adequate provision shall be made to collect, store, and dispose of, all used containers, wrappings, and other
Would an
disposables connected with their
Would
operation.
an adequate provision by the vendor be, tell the town to do it?
No,
No.
it specifically says the peddling, other disposables connected with the peddling operation, which containers shall be either placed inside or affixed to the vehicle. So they have to
So
have,
they have to
they have to have a
provide their
receptacle right
own-
there.
I can appreciate that, but according to the chief, that doesn't mean that they don't leave it there for the town to take care of when they leave.
Well, I think anything around where they're vending and peddling, they have the requirements for appropriate refuse. If they start leaving messes, there's provisions for, that's one of the ones where if they're not following what we interpret, the Board of Selectmen interprets as the ordinance, then we can pull their permit and you guys can have a hearing for them if they appeal it.
I'm just trying to see if there's a
Understood.
way to strengthen it at this point, so we don't have to have this discussion in the
I
future.
think it's the same though as anybody walking out of Centro with a pizza box. If they go down the street.
And I understand that part of it.
Or Marketplace or Cilantro or getting ice cream from the chocolatier, there's trash created, and once they go away from the site.
I appreciate that, I'm just thinking about, in particular, I'm thinking about Quantapug. I mean, if
Or
we're
any
all
of the- or any
comfortable with
of
it,
the-
fine, just as long as we've addressed it, because if it ends up being, you know, more than we are anticipating, it's just one more thing that the
It
regs
sounds
gotta
like
deal
you've
with.
addressed, if a vendor creates their own trash, they need to take it away for sure. They can't dump
For
their
sure.
wrappings from their hot dog boxes or
Absolutely.
something, but.
And,
Okay.
you know, again, the beauty of the rules and regs is you're experimenting with them, you're gonna see how
It's a
they-
work in progress.
Right,
Just-
and you can
I
always
just bring it
revise
up.
it without an ordinance change.
What set the red flag up was the preferred spots, and I'm just envisioning
Yeah.
Quantapug or Chaffinch now being, you know, the corner of Whitfield and Water Street with barrels and
Right.
da-da-da-da, multiple barrels necessary and stuff.
Right, I hear we've told people to use that spot by designating it as such, so.
I think the
So
vendors
next
are,
week.
if they wanna continue to vend and make money, they're gonna be smart enough to make sure that things are disposed of and a mess isn't left. We haven't had that experience yet, but certainly a conversation with them and a reminder when we issue the permits could be
But
in
just
order.
to take that one step further though, Charlie, if somebody's down at Jacobs Beach and a vendor's there, you know, what stops them from taking their container and throwing that garbage into one of our garbage bins down there?
I understand there's always a way
Yeah.
around any
Yeah.
reg, it's just, you know, I just wanna make sure that we are comfortable and Park and Rec understands about these preferred areas.
And there's teeth to it too, I mean, you know, he has the ability to, if you breach a rule or reg, you run the risk of getting your license.
Spirit of the rules versus the
Yeah.
rules.
So,
Under the exceptions, I see there's an exception for persons under 18 years of age. I think that was raised.
It went up from 16 because it was originally 16 because that was the age of majority in Connecticut at the time. So
Oh, right.
it's raised to 18, so we thought it made sense
Makes
to
sense.
to mirror that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
and they can raise money.
So
Girl
is
Scouts, Girl
that, yeah, that,
Scouts.
is that the proverbial,
Girl Scouts.
That's the reason for it.
or lemonade stands?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I had a question regarding the, hold on. So what do you, does this cover the, like we were just at Jacobs Beach yesterday, 3 different ice cream trucks came in. And those folks are all over the place. They're not really in one spot, they're driving around. There's always an exception.
Would that be an exception?
Is that covered? Do you think?
It seems to
If
be a
they,
requirement.
yeah, there's, Rick's been doing something different with the Park and Rec for a while, and this is gonna change the way things happen. So there's been some different procedures in place that weren't really addressed with this process, and I think moving forward, you're gonna see that anything that, anyone that's vending on a town-owned property parking lot,
Right.
per se, is gonna have to be
Right.
compliant with these rules and regulations and the ordinance.
So that means that in the future, they might not be able to drive through the parking lot on their,
That would be our call.
Unless they get a vendor, or unless they get a
Get
license.
Right. Or a letter.
Yeah.
Right. And you choose to regulate, if the town chooses to regulate the number, location.
Yeah.
So as indicated in the rules, there'd be pre-designated locations. Again, that's primarily for controlling, and especially a place like Jacobs, safety is a big issue there. So if kids are running around in the parking lots and going to get the towel from the car, you don't
Cruising
want.
through, yeah.
I had questions around school property, and we understand the rationale for the 300-foot border. What about things like Soccer Fest?
special events.
Special events that take place on those, are they gonna have to, do they have to apply, those vendors have to apply if they're selling Soccer Fest sweatshirts or food or whatever? Because those are typically on school property,
Mhm.
and that, you know, the waiver is from the superintendent, right?
Correct,
Okay,
yeah.
And then-
They control those properties.
right, and the same thing with.
So these rules would not apply in that setting?
No, depending on what they're selling, they still would have to get
Okay.
the permits for vending and peddling.
They get like a 1 day, there's a provision here for a 1 day, because we were, you know, thinking about the town green, and there's quite a few events that occurs.
And then just the one-off, Little League is within 300 feet, and they're selling hot dogs, sodas, et cetera, out of their stand over at Adams.
That's different.
Yeah, is it,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the,
it's a fixed location.
that's a fixed location, so they're not moving
they're not
around.
vending?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
But they still have to comply with health restrictions
Oh,
and
wow.
regulations. So,
Yeah.
And that, complying with health restrictions, that's what controls it in private property, like
Correct.
fairgrounds or something like that, they have to do that, okay.
okay.
Does it say how much the one day?
$25.
25.
Oh, there it is, okay.
Those are defined by statute.
Okay.
So the 200, we can't, that's statutorily established.
What about the fine? Because the fine is actually less than the license fee, if I read it correctly, $199, so it's cheaper to take your chances. and do that.
I think that's a
Raise
statute
or-
too.
Yeah, it's statutorily.
That's statute.
determined.
Yeah, it's too bad.
And just one last question for me, anyway. I know there's always a balance here with constitutional rights in terms of soliciting and vending. Is that, want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, what I'll say is, in the other ordinance, there was a time limit on certain soliciting, and we discussed this at length, looked at some case law and everything. So we have to be very careful about setting time limits on these. We've kind of kept it a little broader. I mean, we have the broad interests of public safety, while, allowing people to come to your door at 8 o'clock at night to,
Yeah, what the
for
public should be.
Environment America or whatever.
I preferred to shut it down at dark,
Right.
because no one wants anybody knocking on their door after dark, if you have your kids home after school, and, but constitutionally and case law-wise, we really can't do it. So the public needs to be aware that there may be occasions where someone's knocking on your door when it's later than you would like them to be. And if they're either charitable and they're registered with the state, or they have our permits, we're limited in how much we can restrict that.
It's like the robocalls, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
We talk to them, we
just
have
turn people
conversations,
off.
and we say, can you please be
Yeah.
considerate of
People's concerns.
people's concerns, because their efforts won't be effective if they're gonna just make everybody mad.
Got it. All right, anything else? We're good?
This is timely, thanks.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion to approve the amendment of the Code of Town of Guilford, Chapter 218, peddling and soliciting?
Weren't we in public hearing? at that?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
you're
true,
right.
you're right, that's right.
Yep, there
That's
you
right. Good point. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the board relative to the ordinance? Is there anyone?
I have some questions.
Absolutely, questions as well. Come on up, state your name and address for the record, please.
Dean Popkin, 523 Briarwood Drive, Guilford, Connecticut. My first question is whether or not these regs and the code address or wrest control from Park and Rec as to where and how they operate the vending locations. You've set up these preferred sites. Does that mean that Park and Rec is no longer controlling it?
They're no longer, the Park and Rec doesn't currently control their parking lots anyway.
Well, like Jacobs, they only allow one person in there. It's through Park and
Well,
Rec,
that's-
is my understanding.
That has been an arrangement that the Board of Selectmen has tolerated with Park and Rec, because the Board of Selectmen has control of the parking lots and use thereof. So, in order to provide some form of food or drink or, vending down there, the board has basically waived its responsibility. This codifies it and is taking it back. We'll work with Park and Rec to ensure that there is continued service down there, but we also need to do it in a manner that is free and open to all vendors, because there was some concern that we had picked winners and losers in regard to who could vend at those parking lots. Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does. The next question I had is, I don't know if you've all probably had kids, or some of you had kids going to various towns playing soccer and other things. All of the other towns seem to allow vending trucks, ice cream trucks in the parking lots to vend for those events.
Yeah.
Currently, we can't do that in Guilford, is my understanding. Is that going to continue, or is there what's the process with regards to those, or that?
Is that the driving through the parking lots during the events type thing? Is that what you're talking?
Parking and, yeah, while the events are going on. Is that something, if it's at the school, we have to go to the police department for
Well, you have
each
to
and
do the
every? or-
permit problem, and that's why we're talking about this. So you have to go through the process. Yeah.
Well, what I'm trying to get clarification is on the process, as it's now addressed in these rules.
So,
Pretty clear. I mean, if you're gonna be on town property, you gotta go through the process.
Okay, there is
You
going to
need a
be, there's not a very clear process, and that's what I was trying to understand.
I think the process is pretty
Yeah,
well
I mean,
detailed there.
that's
If you're
why
gonna
we-
sell anything out of a mobile vehicle in town, you need a permit.
Oh, understood.
Right,
It's
right.
the
And then-
granting of
and
the
then-
permission to get
Right.
into the parking lots to be able to sell.
At
prefer
this,
the
at
location.
this point, we have not precluded anyone from doing that as so long as they have followed the process to get the appropriate permit. So there is no change at this
Okay.
point to the vendor's ability to get that, provided they've complied with getting the appropriate permits. It-
So, yeah, and we've listed the different public parking lots that are preferred. And then what the regs say is it's first come, first serve. You can't reserve it in an unfair way, but you first come, first serve. And there will be an ability, you can't have 10 trucks and not enough parking. So there's gonna be, as we all learned, there'll be some like designated area that will balance kind of the needs of public and parking with, the food establishments.
Right, and I think that's incumbent upon us to work with Park and Rec to determine where at Jacobs Beach the most effective place for those vending machines are, safest place, so as
Trucks.
don't have kids running across the middle of the parking lot to get to an ice cream truck, which we know they're gonna do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
Real quick,
Okay.
Mitch Gold, Director of Human Resources. In the very end, I can find it again, the very end of the ordinance, you have the term fire marshal, which has 2 Ls, which I believe only has 1 L. So I want to get that corrected before it became part of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Proofreaders everywhere.
Okay.
But who's gonna share
Anything
with
else?
us the rules of the town of Orange?
Rick?
Just a
Rick,
question
come on up.
of clarification, if I could ask. So at Jacobs Beach, will you still work with us about the hours they can be in there? Because we don't allow them on camps there. Like you said,
Absolutely.
kids running back and
Absolutely.
forth.
Absolutely.
And we haven't allowed them at Lake Quantico just because of the danger of going across Route 77.
That's fine, we
Parking
can, we can work collectively to determine what is best for the various programs that you're running, without question.
It's actually really helpful, Rick, to hear why some of these restrictions are in place, so people are looking and saying, why, what's going on, how come we're not getting this? It seems like it makes sense, but the Quantapug is a perfect example, just the geography of that spot makes it hard to set somebody up in that
Would it be
parking lot and let people go back and forth. Sorry, Charlie.
Would it be possible in the future, to look into reconstructing or changing the fence to allow minimal one or maybe minimum trucks on that side, on the lake side? I know it's a very tight spot and everything, but it's something.
We
that you-
we only own the beachfront on the lakeside, right?
Pretty much. Well, we have the grass here just south of the beach, too.
That is ours as well.
There's guardrail there, and, I think it'd be hard to get in there.
Okay. It's just something, because I appreciate,
Probably a
I
setback.
agree with you about that whole area. It's just so problematic, but it also is just ripe for some kind of a vending service. Okay.
One other one, the high school hockey team, they've been selling bottles of water, like cookies at concerts. Would they have to be under this ordinance?
Yeah, generally, it's falls under the under 18 thing. So if you're under 18, it was to consider school events, kids raising money for school, Girl Scouts, things like that.
Yeah, so they would be exempt from that.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, assuming no one is doing it is
Unless
over
you have some
18.
really old high school.
Or like, sometimes kids. Soccer fest,
Yeah, again, that's under 18. It's
Okay, thanks.
Good. Thanks, Rick. Anything else? Anyone else from the public? Questions, comments? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to amend the code of the town of Guilford, chapter 218, peddling and soliciting. Is there a motion?
Yeah, make the motion with the, yeah, make the motion, I'll make that motion.
Okay. Second?
Second?
Second comments or questions?
Yeah, I'm just,
All right. Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Second one would be to adopt the regulations, rules and regulations to Town Code Chapter 218. Is there a motion?
so moved.
And a
Second.
Any further discussion? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, thank you all. Item 3, back to our regular scheduled agenda, regular scheduled meeting, programming. Public forum, anyone wishing to address the board on anything that's on the agenda for the board meeting? Hearing none, move on to item 4, excuse me. And that would be 4.1, regular meeting minutes of July 15th, 2019. Is there a motion to approve?
So
So,
moved.
a second.
Second.
Comments, questions, changes, et cetera? I had none. All right, call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none.
I'll
motion-
recuse.
Yeah.
Recuse.
Abstain.
Okay.
Yeah,
Or
recusal and
abstain.
I don't know.
More appropriate.
Whatever it is.
Tracy, you got it. I wasn't here.
You weren't there.
4.2 would be the special meeting minutes from July 15th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Any comments, questions, changes, et cetera? I have none. Call the question, all in favor? Aye, opposed, abstained,
Another abstain.
recusals. Motion carries. 4.3, special meeting, July 19th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion or comments, questions, et cetera? Nope, hearing none. Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals?
Abstain. Three for me, Tracy.
Jeez, we're gonna have to dock you.
I don't know, that was a busy week, it's my luck.
I think you were traveling.
Guy, out of state.
That might have something to do
It
with
happens to all of us.
it. It does. Item 5, Town Planner, George Crawl, and Planning and Zoning Commission Chair, Phil Johnson. 5.1 is to consider and take possible action on the award of RFP number 2-1920, redraft of zoning and subdivision regulations. Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. Would you mind refreshing our memory, since I think the last time we considered this was during budget season, and you made George made a strong case that this is something we need to do, as it's not long overdue, but we're in need of it.
Yes,
Want to talk a little bit
absolutely,
about the reason
The
why?
money was appropriated and approved as part of the budget.
Yep.
The Planning and Zoning Commission created a selection committee pursuant to our process for soliciting proposals regarding professional services. We received 4 proposals. You have a memo from me dated July 16th, which identifies the proposal firms. The selection committee reviewed the proposals and unanimously recommended Planometrics as the firm to be retained, subject to your approval. And the proposal was within the budget, more or less. We received proposals of $55,000, $60,000, $69,000, and $79,000 from the 4 vendors, all of whom were qualified to do this work. The Planometrics proposals for $60,000. Going back to the initial question, the Planning and Zoning Commission and its various advisory components, including the Planning Committee, many of the people who work with the Planning and Zoning Commission feel a desperate need to revise the zoning code, bring it up to date in terms of its format, structure, vocabulary, consistency with state law. This board agreed with that. Board of Finance did as well. It's long overdue, as Matt said. Planometrics is a very experienced firm. They specialize really in this kind of work. They've done similar projects, as I said in the memo of July 16th, in Brantford, Madison, Westbrook. They're developing a standard format for this, which makes it easy to work within various towns. Obviously, the substance of the zoning is different depending on what town you're in, but Planometrics has a lot of experience in Connecticut doing these kinds of projects. They also have a lot of experience in Guilford. They've worked on several projects for the Planning and Zoning Commission previously, including our so-called growth management plan, which was developed 8 or 9 years ago. They're very familiar with Guilford. We really like their approach to this project. Lots of public participation, and we, the committee, feels we would like you to move forward with this.
When you say lots of public participation, will there be in the process as it moves along, actual public hearings?
Numerous, more than one. One of the things with the consultant is that, we like the consultant to be at the key public events. Their expense is significantly related to how many times they have to come down here and go to meetings. And so we will be managing a lot of the public participation process ourselves, Aaron and I in particular, in order to maximize the effectiveness of the consultant's time. But there will be lots of public participation, including formal public hearings, but there'll be lots of meetings with interested parties, groups, stakeholders along the way, short of public hearing. So as you know, in Guilford, the public likes to be involved in these things.
Absolutely.
And
We like to have them involved.
we welcome that. Makes it a lot easier down the road when you want to get it approved, if everybody's on board with it. That's the idea. We're not concentrating really on major substantive changes in the structure of zoning. It's mostly focused on format and consistency. There are lots of inconsistencies and kind of, we've amended it many times over the last 10 or 15 years, and so it's a little bit of a hodgepodge of cobbled together changes. So this will be a lot more readable and a lot more user-friendly for everybody.
Yeah, so this is really gonna be helpful to citizens as well as the professionals in the
Absolutely.
field, right?
Right, yeah.
That's one of the main reasons. I was gonna ask the same thing, so it's not so much that we're looking to make vast changes, we're looking
No,
to make this
correct,
document
that's correct.
clearer for everybody.
Can I ask that question a different way? Well, we may not be making vast
Right.
changes, but are we making small changes that could impact somebody's use of a piece
They
of property?
could, but this will be very transparent too. If there are changes like that will actually affect what a particular person in a particular type of property would be able to do, yes. There might be some of those.
Okay.
But the idea is not to make wholesale changes.
The idea is also, we're not looking to sneak anything by.
Absolutely.
If there is a
Thank you.
change, it's
No.
going to be,
Very
here's it's
transparent.
changed, here's the logic behind it, here's the new definition.
Well,
and
let's
then
come
move
at that from another way, though. I mean, I can appreciate the mechanics of, this is really dealing more with the mechanics of the code, and I can appreciate what you're saying. Over the years, things have happened, and, to redevelop the consistency makes a lot of sense, but what if, in one of the earlier public comment areas, there is, a movement to make some major change? I mean, are we prepared to do that type of thing?
I
My
think-
major, I mean, I don't know.
It's probably more
traffic
likely
patterns
that
or
people will
something.
resist change than trying to make major change.
Right.
No, how many?
I guess it depends on where people are going with it.
Yeah.
One of the things we would probably say is that obviously anybody can propose a change in the zoning code at any time they want to, and the Planning and Zoning Commission has to consider it. We can't tell people, no, you can't make that
Well,
proposed
the
change. But
reason-
what we would try to do is discourage people who might see this as an opportunity to make significant changes. We might encourage them to make their proposal sort of outside the framework of what the consultant is at least trying to do. Obviously, if somebody wants to change the R8 zone from 4-acre minimum lot size to half an acre, that's a huge change. And we wouldn't want to consider that as part of this project, I think is what we're really saying.
And I appreciate it, and that's what I was trying to get to, but what I wanted to make sure that we continued to have, because, we've been talking to the facilities group, and there's some major things that on the potential on the horizon, and I just want the citizens to understand that this is not gonna change the path to any of those changes.
No, it won't. This, a good example of what this might deal with, that would be substantive, and it's hard to answer these questions hypothetically, but, you know, a lot of the zoning code, and as with any other code, as you're just talking about, is interpretation. And, you know, for example, if you read one section of the code now, it says it's 5 feet off the property line. You read another section, it says, well, maybe it's 15 feet off the property line. We've always said it's 15 feet, but over here it says 5. You know, that could be a substantive change to somebody. So but the important point is that we would make that as transparent as we possibly can, so that anybody who might be affected by the 5 to 15 would know about it. That's what we're going to try to do.
Okay. Lou?
So to that point, the note I'm making, and I'll say is, and to follow up on all these comments here, there's gonna be a lot going on behind the scenes with the consultant and staff, and then there's gonna be some public hearings, and then at some point, we're gonna get like a final report. What would be super helpful is to the extent that it's able to sort of spot changes other than, you know, grammar and sort of just cleaning up and synthesizing things. So the substantive changes we're talking about, if we could get something that looks like a summary of these are changes that might resemble substantive
Yeah.
changes, that would be helpful for us as to keep a running total.
Yeah, if
as
in
they come up.
in one of the hearings,
Makes sense.
something pops up
They're hesitating.
that we ought to be aware of, we want to be number one. Number two, I think a black line, you know, copy of the changes.
I think
makes
that's
sense.
where the
Yeah.
consultant is going to be very helpful,
Right.
because they've
Right.
done that before. It's not,
Yeah.
you know, Guilford isn't that different than Madison or Branford, Westbrook in terms of how this works. They're going to be able to highlight those things so that people can get a clear understanding of what's changing.
Yeah, we
mentioned
just
something
don't want to
about-
be presented with a new one and not understand what we're changing.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
all of our memories are special.
I think that's
Roger that.
it's possible that, as it was done in Madison, I believe, they've actually adopted sections of the code separately. So, for example, they did, you know, chapters A through B, A through Z, or A through N, which dealt with residential development as one section. They approved that. Then they developed another section related to commercial zoning, and they approved that separately. It's possible that could happen. Lou mentioned something about a report. I'm not envisioning that there's going to be any report, but the end product of this is going to be a new zoning code. Now, there will probably be sort of summary reports along the way that may highlight things that we're addressing or changes that we're proposing to make. And we're not expecting, we didn't ask in our RFP that the consultant provide any report to the Board of Selectmen, for example. I think you just mentioned that. You said we. I don't know if you meant the Board of Selectmen, but
I did.
once you're done here, you're out of the picture. That's probably good, right?
Yes, it is.
Not really.
Well, I
out of
don't
the
want to
picture.
be out of the picture.
No,
If
no,
you,
no, you
in
know
one
what?
of these hearings,
No.
something pops up that
Right.
there is a level of interest of making some, you know,
Well, of course, not that you want this or expect this, but adoption of the new zoning code and the subdivision code is under the authority of the
well,
Planning and
how
Zoning
about it
Commission.
this, rather than requiring in the RFP, Planometrics make a report,
I'll make a
you-
report.
Yeah, that's exactly,
Oh, yeah.
that would be,
That's
that would be
yeah,
the way we do it.
let's
You-
let's
you-
anticipate
Right.
3 progress
Anticipate,
reports.
yes.
You know, is that unreasonable?
No, not at all.
Okay.
All right,
Right, and George,
That's
I-
good.
And that's a good clarification. I
Yes.
appreciate
Right,
what
I
you're
I
saying.
think that's absolutely.
George, I just want to pick up on a very subtle comment you just made, which is this board traditionally does not weigh in on planning and zoning decisions. That's not our role. That is the statutorily protected role granted to the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission that this board appoints. That does not mean that we can come back in and weigh and say, you need to do this, you need to do that.
Sure.
So that was, I just wanted to make sure that was, the independence and autonomy of planning and zoning is essential, in my mind's eye. So,
How do you see the time frame generally?
We have a proposed time schedule with the consultant prepared. It's going to be a little over a year to do based on that proposal.
My inclination would be, as George suggested, to try and do it in smaller chunks, because if you try and swallow the whole thing at once, it's gonna be a lot for anyone to digest.
We good?
Okay.
So I guess what we're asking you to do is approve this recommendation, authorize the first selectman to enter into a contract with Planometrics.
So moved. Thank you.
I'll second it.
Call the question. Any further comments, sir? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals. Hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is great. It's leaking somewhere. Yep. Did I put it on my thing? Okay. All right. Item 6, with Finance Director Mary Jane. Discuss and take possible action to approve and authorize First Selectman to sign Hilltop Securities Municipal Advisory Agreement. This is a quick way of background. Hilltop Securities is the firm that our previous bond advisors, IBIC, which you're familiar with, Bill Lindsay and Mark Chapman, what is it, Independent Bond Investment Advisors, who have been doing Guilford's bond work for for a long time. A long time. And they've recently, in order to get some scope and some back office services, have merged with Hilltop Securities. And Hilltop Securities has a, I think, a more stringent compliance department than
This contract's incredible.
IBIC. And this is what we're being asked to sign, and this is for a 3-year agreement. I will say, I've had the pleasure of working with them for a number of years in my prior role, as well as the last 2 years here as we prepare to go to the bond market. And I have to say, Bill Lindsay does a tremendous job of pulling the materials together, prepping Mary Jane and myself for the calls with the rating agencies. We, over the last couple of weeks, had calls with S&P and Fitch, and Bill has us well prepared. And while that's not solely responsible for our ratings, we have maintained AAA ratings with both S&P and Fitch. And Fitch upgraded our band.
Bands.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure
Is
what
it
that
double A
is.
plus one or whatever, which is
It's their highest
rating. So, and we just went to the street last week for bonds as well as bands.
Taxable bonds, tax exempt bonds, and bands.
Right.
I can give a small report on that if you want.
Absolutely.
All of our interest rates came in lower
Hmm.
than what we had anticipated based on current sales in Connecticut for similar types of products. Our tax exempt bonds came in at 2.245. We had anticipated somewhere between 2.375 and 2.5. Our taxable bonds came in at 2.464, which was a tremendous interest rate. We had anticipated something over 2.5. And our short-term notes came in at 1.293. We had anticipated between 1.35 and 1.45. And on top of
Yep.
that, we've brought in just shy of $165,000 of additional premiums that we can use to offset interest, so to mitigate the tax increase for the bonds.
Right.
Can you just walk through that premium point, because that comes up a lot, it comes up in budget season a lot. And what happens is, the entities that are selling these bonds on Wall Street or wherever they sell them, right, make some money in that process, and they share that premium with the town? Is that what, when you say that
Correct, they
premium?
actually buy our bonds at a higher value
Okay.
for just that reason. So that delta comes to us as additional revenue, so to speak, which is shown as an offset to the interest that we pay them in the end.
And you have, and the town has the ability to sort of apply that premium to
Correct, that is-
offset some other impact.
And that is really the only thing we can do
Do it.
with those funds. We can't go out and, fund the planning and zoning,
Yeah.
work unless that was being bonded. But, so it's specifically written as an offset to interest. We have, over the past few years, set a lot of those premiums aside and used them for these first few years of when the high school bonding came into effect for our payments. So as we report during the budget season, how we're trying to mitigate those high amounts of increases, we're using these premiums to bring that down, which we've shown you know, over some of the graphs that we used during the budget season. So we're still, we're no longer, when we have such smaller amounts of bonding, we don't always anticipate premiums
Premiums, sure.
or to this much, to this extent. So this was actually very good for us. We really hadn't anticipated this much, you know, probably half of this is what we thought of at the beginning. So it was a very good bond, so we were very pleased.
Yeah, I bet.
I don't have any issue with the financial side, because I do think we've been served well. I am noticing, though, in this contract, in this age of cybersecurity, most new contracts have a clause in there about responsibility, and in particular, their responsibility of disclosing any of our information to third parties and that type of thing. I didn't see anything specifically. I saw a lot of waivers, you know, whether it be third-party payments and limitations of liabilities. They've got themselves covered, but I didn't see any clause in there about their responsibilities regarding, in particular, cybersecurity in controlling our account information within their operation and within their party.
I can certainly talk to them about it, although there's no information we give them
That isn't publicly available.
that isn't already publicly available. They're not holding any of our accounts. Everything is done for us. We
Well,
give
whenever
them-
they make a payment or
Oh,
receive a
that's not,
payment.
they have nothing to do with that. We don't make, I mean, we make our payment to them, but anything to do with the bond sale
We
and the
make
payments.
a payment to them, they have information. Period.
Well, they are covered under the Graham
Yeah.
Bailey or whatever it is, too.
Well, that's
The
my
most-
point. I
the
know
most
they're all
heavily-
covered, but in this new world that everybody's talking about, you know, security and everything, and a lot of contracts now have a clause about that.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly
Ask the
ask them
question
about
if
that. I
there's
can
any-
certainly ask them about that. Again, they're not receiving any sensitive data from us. We pull information from our CAFR, from our audited financials, and give them specific information from that. It's really just data that anybody can Google and find. We're not giving them anything secure. They're not seeing any payroll information or our bank accounts.
Well, I can
or any-
appreciate what you're
I'm ju-
saying.
I'm just
I
trying to
think
put you a little
Home
bit.
Depot thought
Right.
that with their air conditioning people. That's how they got hacked. So I understand what you're saying, and
We
you
give
know,
them a
ask the
check so they-
question and maybe check with Pam, is there any clauses that can strengthen it at all? Because other contracts I've seen recently start including something to that
Can
effect.
certainly ask them.
You know,
Certainly
can I
ask
Pam,
say,
Pam.
I did send this, because this isn't my area, so I sent this to Jeff D'Onofrio, and he basically signed off on it, so.
And so did our bond counsel. Our bond counsel also signed off on it. It's a typical, it's typical at this point.
I understand.
The standard, we have the right to terminate for cause, you know, within 30 days. And as a tie-in with our selling our bonds, the proceeds from our bonds are also used to pay for our issuance costs.
Right.
So we don't budget for these services. You won't see me coming to you for that. We typically pay for that out of the proceeds from the bonds.
It sounds like most of what we are concerned about is not applicable here, but I still think it would be good to ask the
I would certainly ask the
question.
question,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because the whole country takes for granted that everything is safe. And unfortunately, every day we see that things are much more complicated than we realized. And so this may be perfectly fine, but I just think it
Yeah,
would be.
no, absolutely, I have no problem
Yeah.
asking the question, I just wanted to
Yeah.
explain the type of data that we're providing to them that they would be holding, so to speak. But yes, they could get a check from us and, use that
Well,
information
yeah,
against.
send,
Yeah.
there's 2 or 3 clauses in here that send red flags up in my mind, so I think it'd be worth asking a question.
Not a problem.
Are their fees competitive, reasonable, based on any information that you might have?
Absolutely, they're pretty competitive throughout, the few financial
Same.
advisors that people use. Yeah.
All right, we'll look for some kind of follow-up from you.
Sure.
And we'll assume we get it as you authorized me to sign this agreement. Is there a motion to authorize?
So
say
moved.
Second. Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, refusals, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7, Park and Rec Director Rick Maynard. Come on up, Rick.
Morning again.
Good morning. All right, item 7.1, Rick, consider and take possible action on the purchase of a Redexum cedar.
Sure, so the Redexum 1575 is a 60-inch toe-behind cedar. It was approved in the budget, and we got quotes, MTE Turf Equipment Company it's the only company in Connecticut that sells these,
Right.
but they do have the Massachusetts state contract price of $578.37. But I did get 2 other quotes just to kind of see if we're good with that, and the other prices were $17,198 and change, and $16,898. So the MT is the best price anyway, and I believe the budget is about $17,000, so we're under budget.
Okay.
So we'd like to request to approve of purchasing this from MTE Turf Equipment.
Does anyone want to put that in form of a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Hearing none, call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, refusals, hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you.
7.2, discuss and take possible action to contract with engineering firm for boiler replacement at the community center.
So we have the 5 boilers at the community center, they'll be knocked down to 3.
Okay.
Again, we talked about this during the budget time.
Budget season,
and
that's right.
So we sent an RFP out to the 6 firms that's on the town's on-call list. We had 2 responses. One was from Antonazzi, and they're actually subbing it out to Diversified Technology Consultants, DTC. Their quote was $37,300. The other one was Silver Petroselli at $19,290. And so we want to request that the Board of Selectmen award it to Silver Petroselli so we can get them started on the construction documents, specs, all that. And then the plan is to, Steve's here to double check me on this, but I think the plan is to do the work now probably next spring. We're not going to get it done before this heating
Not
season.
before the heating season,
Yeah.
okay.
Is it just me or did these files get crossed? Mine's got the same thing about the cedar.
It's a paragraph within it. They're all-
It's the second, it's the third paragraph down in the same letter.
Same, yeah.
Skip selling the equipment to
Ah,
Madison, but we'll
okay.
come back to
All
that,
right.
sure. What, do you know why there was such a, what is it, almost $20,000 difference?
I don't, it was, the same RFP went out, and, we don't question it, once it goes
Yeah.
out, we just, wait and see what we
My
get for
guess
prices.
would be is they're subbing it out to DTC, they're not doing it in-house.
And that's why it was so much higher?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've done this, but I mean, we certainly don't want to spend more than we need to, but Silver Petroselli is going to do a good job.
We feel confident in them, they
Okay.
have in-house staff, they've come, they've met with us, and we think they'll do it.
I feel like they've done
They've
a,
done a bunch of work for Board of Ed
I
also.
was gonna say, they're the roofing
They're the roof
engineering.
guys.
Oh, all right, okay, so they're
So
known
it's a
to us.
familiar name.
Okay.
Very.
So Rick, this $19,000 just for the engineering costs, or is this the project itself?
It's engineering, construction documents, and then overseeing the actual
Right.
work. Then we'll be bidding it out. They'll come up with the bid specs.
Right.
We'll bid it out, and it'll be, the project's more, Steve, what was it, around 150,000, I think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
to do the complete project is gonna
Yeah.
be less than 200,000, this is just for design.
Good.
Right.
And if I could add, I would have to double check, but I don't think the Encore will sub out, I don't believe, so I have a feeling that's not even a legitimate way to bid on it.
It's a good point,
Oh, that's interesting.
really good point.
Good point.
Okay.
Anyway,
All right. Is there a motion to award the contract to Silver Petrocelli for the engineering work associated with the boiler replacement at the community
So
center?
moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, refusals, hearing none, motion carries. 7.3, consider and take possible action to sell land, plane, equipment to Madison Parks and Recreation Department. Rick, first question, what's land,
Yeah.
plane?
lead me to it.
We're selling them a plane.
Something
It
level.
doesn't fly, it stays on the
We
wing.
didn't even know we owned a plane.
The rain in Spain stays mainland?
Oh,
It's a piece of equipment for leveling. We bought it originally for helping level the ball fields. Quite frankly, we haven't used it much. It was it just, we have better equipment, it does the job better for us. Madison has actually borrowed it a few times, and they see a need for it, for some uses they have, I think using it in parking lots and some other things. And so they've used it a few times, and so, and speaking with my peer there, Scott Erskine, I said, well, if we sell it to you, and if we decide we want to borrow it back, can we borrow it back? And they said, yeah, you can use it anytime you want. So it seems like a win-win for us.
When you say we have other equipment, what other equipment do we have that?
We have ball field grooming machines, we have the AVI that we bought a couple years ago. It's, it works better on our base paths. Our base paths are narrow, and it just works better. Land plan is too wide to use it for the ball, for the.
So this is not the groom grassy areas, but
No.
dirt areas.
Yeah.
So like if you had like a cinder parking lot like like Madison might have out
Right.
there at the, whatever that field is on the right-hand side
Yeah.
as you go out Route 1.
Mhm.
So they use it for that kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we don't need it.
We don't need it. Again, if we decide we want to borrow it, we can borrow it back and we can use it.
Pam?
And just pointing out that technically what you're doing is you're waiving
The
the
bid.
used property policy for the town, which normally we would put it on the town website, so opening it up to other bids, but we don't publish usually because it's not cost effective.
Yeah.
So, the people that would likely see it on the town website is not very many.
And actually, I think we did that a
Did you do
couple years
that?
ago, and there was nobody interested in buying it at the time.
That's good.
Okay,
So we
good.
did.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's great.
Yeah.
So we don't need a motion to waive the policy?
Yeah, we do.
No,
We do.
since you've already, he
We're gonna-
did what he was supposed to do and didn't get any offers, so.
Okay, good. All right, how much are we getting for this?
$1,000.
The book value, or when we bought it, was 2,590. And I think that, according to G&H Equipment, who we bought it from, they said the current book value is like $1,750
Right.
right now. But, I mean, Madison's our neighbor, I think
Gotcha.
if we can, in spirit of
That's fine.
cooperation, if we can do it for 1,000, I think it's reasonable.
Especially since we can.
Borrow it
back if we
anytime.
need it.
That's right. That's right. And the $1,000 will go back to the general fund, I suspect, right?
I don't know where,
Yes.
Okay.
Just confirming.
I'll make a motion to approve this sale.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Item 8, environmental planner Kevin McGee. Kevin is here to discuss and take possible action to contract with All Habitat Services under state bid number 18PSX0145 for Lake Quanapog invasive plant treatment. Kevin, can you give us sort of a Reader's Digest version of why we're doing this and what it is and why we're doing it?
Lake Quanapog has numerous aquatic invasive weeds up there. Some of them are not common to the lake. Others are just nuisance plants which are creating problems with the boating activities of the lake there. Major outbreaks or issue areas are the north end of the lake by the boat launch. There's a center shoal area just south of the swimming area, and then the southern portion or southern channel of the lake, where we get some heavy growth in there, which prevents the kayaks and canoes and boaters from getting to the southern portion of the lake. We received, applied to the DEP, and we received a permit for the application of pesticides within the lake, which we received in the beginning of July. We received a price estimate from All Habitat Services, which is a Connecticut vendor for invasive plant control within the lakes of the state of Connecticut, and they have a state big cost here. And their cost of treatment, paper in front of me, would be $12,546.41. I've been in conversation with them, and they can start application next week within the lake.
And this covers both the north end and the south end. There was a significant focus on the south end over the last 18 months.
The last 18 months, there was last year.
Excuse me.
The lake is actually has some serious issues. I get a little more issues this year than in the past because last year we weren't able to do treatment due to concerns of DEP and 2 plants of concern within the lake. one of the plants is located in the southern section of the lake, and they had problems getting there last year due to heavy deposits of weeds floating to the surface from the treatment beforehand. Those have actually, a good majority of those have settled down, so there is access to the southern portion of the lake. So weed harvesting really isn't needed this year, but we need to monitor it again possibly for next year. If we get the weeds killed this year and floating to the top again, we may have an issue next year. Might require harvesting. We have to keep an eye on that part. But this year we don't need the harvesting of the south side. Hopefully the treatment and the stuff will just settle to the bottom.
Good. Question relative to funding, the 12,000, is that coming out of the 2019 budget? Do we?
We
carried
requested carrier
force?
from the 2018-2019
Right.
period. I've also have a purchase order coming over also to cover the monitoring by the Connecticut Ag Station, and that should be submitted over today for that part there for their monitoring, which is $2,500 a year.
Right.
And they also provide us advisories in terms of treatment of the lake and how to take care of the lake within that price.
Right, in our continuing efforts to maintain the viability of Lake Quanapug for residents, kayakers, sailing, whatever.
Yep.
We've traditionally been funding about $20,000 a year for these kinds of programs. That $20,000 has effectively been $17,500 for us. We're still getting the $2,500 contribution from Choate.
I'll be following up with them.
Okay.
Basically, this past year, I took it over from Park and Rec, so I'll be, with this treatment here, I'll be contacting them and sending them, if I need to, a bill or something like that for their contribution.
Right, and Choate's interest is that they run their crew team at Lake Quanapug as well, so they've.
And they're highly affected by that treatment in the north end of the
North
lake
end.
there.
Good.
So, these invasive plants get into the lake from boats that have been put in and bilges coming out, or there's weeds stuck around tires of
Correct. They get basically from lake to lake. They
trailers.
come on. They get caught on the trailers. They get caught on the props of the boats. Someone kind of dry up and stick to the side of the boat. They then get dropped into the boat. The state has a little sign saying, "Please clean your boat," but they don't provide any like hoses or anything else like that, or anything for them to really make sure the boat's clean from when they leave one location to the other.
So what can people do to minimize the risk of cross-contaminating lakes?
They should, when they leave a lake area, they should just make sure of broom, go back to their props, peel off whatever's wrapped around their motors, and make sure it's just left at that lake they're leaving from. Go home, clean them off in their yard too, wash it down before then they go into another lake area. To help with the growth of or actually even the regular weeds in the lake. Run into problems where people just love having green lawn right down to the lake, and then they have their yard companies come and apply nitrogen and other chemicals. They have this nice green yard, and all that then a heavy rainstorm rushes into the lake, and what the chemical does to the yard to make it nice and lush, it does to the lake, and they end up with a large growth of weeds within the lake because of all the new nutrients that these neighboring yards provide to it there. So one thing as the neighbors and stuff can help do is just help maintain like a buffer to the lake, have some higher grass, some higher vegetation there, which helps as a filter. Watch the amount of chemicals you use, and don't really apply just before a heavy rainstorm, because it's not going to help your yard at all before a rainstorm, because it's just going to be washed right into the lake itself. So there are some things that everybody can do to help neighbors and users of the lake also.
Awesome.
So
Thank you.
since the town is incurring this significant expense to control the weeds, and that is a benefit to those property owners, is there anything we can do to do more than encourage them or remind them about that? Can we require them to do that?
We try through wetlands. Unfortunately, if they do some clearing and stuff like that, but sometimes stuff gets done in small little bits where then eventually there's a big opening. But we're trying to get a public education campaign out to the neighbors of the lake there regarding their activities. I mean, amazingly enough, we have all these geese out there, and the nitrogen from the geese also helps increase the fertilization of the lake, shall we say. Road activities, silts, all that type of stuff. So it's important really that around lakes and bodies like that we sweep around those fairly early in the year to cut down on the nitrogen and everything else and contamination from our roads and activities to the lakes and stuff.
Good. Anything further? Good, thank you, Kevin.
Yep.
Is there a motion to approve signing the contract with All Habitat Services under the state bid for Lake Quanapog invasive plant treatment?
So moved.
And a second.
I'll second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Item 9, discuss and take possible action on agreement with CGI Communications for a 2019 community video program. Unfortunately, Brian McGlone is unable to be here to talk to this initiative, but this came through economic development. CGI is a company that provides online, is a production company that makes and then hosts online videos about communities. I had the opportunity to be part of a presentation, and I saw the town of Newtown is one among several communities within Connecticut that have utilized their services. These videos are hosted at CGI's location. But we would, obviously pop a link on our webpage to that. And they talk about, in Newtown, they talk about quality of life, they talk about education, they talk about recreation, they talk about the business environment. We had utilized CGI several years ago, and then stopped using them for some reason. It's Brian's recommendation that we move forward, and I'm supportive of it as well. This agreement has been worked through with legal. They were actually willing to work with us on add some language to their agreement, particularly as it relates to the indemnification. We had some very specific language, and they were happy to add it in. No cost to the town of Guilford for these promotional videos. They and just so as you understand, they're working. They will go out and work with the individual merchants in town, because they will allow merchants to purchase advertising around the banners. They have a banner page around each of these videos before you launch them.
Is it strictly community-based advertising?
When you say, what do you mean by community-based? Just Guilford.
Right.
Yes, yeah, just Guilford. They're already engaged with Shoreline Chamber on a similar initiative for the Shoreline Chamber in the area. So there's a good possibility that some of the Guilford businesses will already be aware of this. And buying one gets you both, apparently, from CGI, because it's the Shoreline Chamber.
I don't want to overthink it. I just get a little hesitant with the advertising side of it. Is there any disclaimer at all about the towns? I mean, somebody may, one or two people may have a lot of advertising, and other people may not have any advertising.
Right.
Is there any potential disclaimer? Must be
I
handled.
Yeah, Sam,
to that,
yeah.
because, that was a definite
That was a concern. That was a concern of ours.
And I also spoke with Jeff D'Onofrio, and he's recommending we have a disclaimer on our website where we have that link that's not an
Okay.
endorsement of any
Yeah.
of the advertise.
I don't want to be negative
No, you're
about it,
absolutely right.
and obviously things have to be paid for somehow,
Right.
but.
Yeah, but that disclaimer will say we're not favoring any of these. And actually, the one thing, I will be providing them with a letter of introduction that they can use with the town merchants. So if you get a chance, take a look at Town of Newtown's webpage, on their banner page on the far right. Really, some of them are pretty slick. They do a nice job.
And do they update it from time to time?
I don't know what the update is, the update schedule is.
'Cause I could see it being
Right.
interesting and then
Right.
getting stale.
Yeah, and that may well have been what happened with the
Yeah.
previous use of CGI. But, some of the things, lifestyle, quality of life
Yeah.
is probably not gonna change much over the next, 10 to 15 years. I think if you talk about, the business climate, that may have the opportunity to change a little bit. But it's a good point. We'll check with them.
Okay, do you need a motion?
Yeah, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move it.
Second.
Anything further? Call the
Sounds
question.
good. Thank
Call the
you.
question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Okay. Item 10. Well, we already did it. We obviated it.
Did you do the vote on that?
Yeah, we did.
So one thing I want to point out is because it's not really listed as an agenda item, the rules and regs, you gotta put that in the next Board of Selectmen meeting that you'll vote to adopt.
Adopt it
these
right
new
then and
regs
there.
That were,
Right.
that were
So do you want us-
recommended by the chief of
So do you want us to do it again now?
It's on the
Yeah,
agenda.
I'm not, did they vote?
They
Yeah.
voted after
Okay.
the public hearing.
After, when we were out of the public hearing?
Hearing, yep.
Yeah, that's fine, I know.
Okay, thank you. Item 11, discuss and take possible action to set a public hearing date of Tuesday, September 3rd, 8:30 a.m. at Guilford Town Hall to obtain comment on an ordinance to amend the code of the Town of Guilford, Chapter 148, Building Construction. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second.
I'll second.
Lou, we're here.
This thing is with an enormous amount of help from staff at town, Sandy, Veronica.
Well, I think the staff and you did most of it, so.
Yeah,
My
listen.
name's on there, but.
So this has been in the works for a while, and I think everybody will see it basically significantly trims down the amount of individual items that are charged in the ordinance, okay? And it changes the way in which building permits will be calculated from a square footage-based system to a value system, and which is consistent with what almost everybody else in the area does. I'd sent around I didn't see it in this packet here, but I did send around a survey that had been prepared by Kim Norman, and really the amounts that we're charging are on the bottom half of what surrounding towns are actually doing, but even with that, it will tend to, the value-based calculations will tend to increase the total amount of revenue generated in the department by these programs, even with cutting out all the individual little charges that had existed previously. So, taken together, it's simpler and will produce more revenue. And I'm glad that we were able to get it to this point and push it forward to a public hearing.
And it brings us in line with what other communities are doing.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And there was a little bit of public feedback in response to when we discussed this at a previous meeting, and the revenue, yes, it's going to give us a little more revenue, but the whole point of this was not to see how much money we could get from contractors or ultimately residents building things. It was more to make it a fairer valuation, I'm just kind of repeating what you said, and also sort of like the planning and zoning to make it a little more understandable too, and less of the little small things and more of an easier way to figure out the cost. And we were very low in comparison to other towns, and we did not bring it up to the top at all, did we? In terms
No,
of
not by any means.
No,
Compared to other towns.
no.
And some folks may be wondering, this can be discussed at the public hearing too, but like, how do you establish value? And there is in fact a formula. In addition to the ordinance change, there's a similar to what we saw before with the peddlers. There's basically a worksheet that can be changed from time to time that the building officials use to establish value. So it's not just like randomly assessing value for each property. There's a formula to assess value, and it would be helpful if we had staff there to explain that.
Explain it, we were out there.
So there's a way to make it make sense and uniform.
I think that all sounds great. I'm a little concerned about the date and time of the meeting, though. If we expect a lot of input, it's the day after Labor Day. It's not even our regular meeting day. It's the day that people afterward will say, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I mean, is that
That's a good point.
nothing?
Yeah, do you think this is one of those meetings that we should have at night? I not looking for another night meeting, but is this do you think this has enough impact
Yeah, I
to
think
people
it
that?
does. That is probably a good suggestion. I know we've been.
Because we always say we're willing to do night meetings, and we don't do that many, and often we do a night meeting and we get about the same attendance as we
Have
might
we
get in
had
the
that
morning meeting.
much inquiry about it? I mean, I know.
Well, I'm not so sure it's necessarily been on people's radar yet, and now it certainly will be, I think.
Well, we can certainly advertise it on our webpage. Unfortunately, there's no longer a local reporter for the Guilford Courier, but we could certainly reach out to Brian Boyd. Zoe Roos has taken a position with the Town of Madison's Board of Education. But we can certainly reach out to Brian Boyd to let him know so that this can get some publicity as well. Plus, we've got to post it, it's a public hearing, right?
I think
If
that
people
meeting's a
want to
good
try to
idea.
pull their calendars up to, is that something we could do? So we probably
At
should.
the risk of making tons of enemies, do you want to have the whole meeting that night? The whole meeting be on Tuesday night, the 3rd?
That's still right
No.
back from vacation, or right back off the
Okay.
holiday weekend. You think that's any better?
To do it in the evening
Yeah.
for this purpose, I do think that evening is
That
better.
means-
And I'm suggesting
Yeah.
the whole
Because-
meeting. I mean,
Yeah.
just our whole, we're changing our Board of Selectmen meeting anyway because of Labor Day.
Mhm.
So instead of changing it to the morning of the 3rd, what if it was the evening of the 3rd? I don't know, I'm just.
No, no.
Yeah. Does that work?
Can we switch it to the 5th? I'm not so sure Tuesday the 3rd is even good for me
I-
anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, people are still.
Yeah, I could.
The 5th works for me.
I'd rather not, but I can.
The 5th works.
Yeah, that's good.
You're a trooper.
No, it's not my
All
birthday.
right, so what are we saying, do it in the evening at 3rd, or just?
No, we're gonna do we'd have our regular morning meeting on the 3rd, and then this special meeting will be the 5th
Yeah. I think that's-
at 7:30. Question, is the community center available? We'll find out. Yeah, if not, we'll find a spot. Firehouse or something.
Okay, so the regular meeting is still the 3rd at 8:30. Okay.
All right, so,
I'm also going to add that in the pipeline, we also have a proposal from the Fire Commission. They want to propose a change to the way, I think really frankly, in addition to a charge for the fire marshal inspections. So that's in process. Staff is going to work on, with that commission, to kind of come up with a specific proposal.
gotcha.
So my point is, this is not happening in a vacuum. I think across the board, there's some changes that are likely to be coming through.
And also in the health department as well, right?
And I thought inland wetlands as well. So there's some changes, I'm looking at you, Pam, there's some changes that are coming down the pike to bring all these various fees current.
So that begs the question, do we do them all at the same time, once we get them, or do you want it to start taking it?
I think
chipping
it
away
makes
at
sense to do them separately.
Okay.
This way people can kind of digest what's before them, but my
That's
point
fine.
is, don't be surprised as
Right.
there's more changes coming.
Well, this is the substantive one.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
the
the one,
biggest one.
and the one that we've been working on the longest, right?
Right, yes.
So is the 5th okay?
Yep.
7:30? Charlie, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so then let's change the motion to set the public hearing date for Thursday, September 5th at 7:30 PM. And it's gonna be at, we're gonna say at the
Hopefully the
community
community
center, or the location to be determined, to obtain comment on the ordinance to amend the town code of Guilford, chapter 148, building construction. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Item 12, appointments and resignations. 12.1, act on the resignation of Susanna Smith from the Historic District Commission. Is there a motion to do so with appreciation and regret?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Item 12.2, act on resignation of Sarah Williams for the Safe Streets Task Force, also with appreciation and regret. Is there, I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Is it,
Opposed,
Is-
abstained, recusals? Yep,
go ahead, we'll vote.
all right.
Is this the second person that?
Yeah. Sarah Williams was always, I sort of coerced Sarah Williams into being on this board. For those who know.
Yeah, it wasn't a person thing, are we under control
Yeah.
with numbers of people and stuff?
Yeah, we are, and actually,
Okay.
we replaced the previous one that resigned, Sarah Prown, I believe was her name. We replaced her with Bob Yarrow, who was inadvertently left off the original list because, unbeknownst to us, he got rid of the email address, the Gmail email address he was using, and is now just using the UPenn address. So he missed the opportunity to affirmatively respond and to be recommended, so he replaced Sarah Prown.
Did we appoint them?
Not yet, we will.
Okay.
That just happened, so we'll.
Okay.
I suspect somebody else will be interested.
Actually, if we want to amend the, agenda to add 12.5, which is to,
Sure.
is there a motion to?
So moved.
And a
Second.
second? Good, 12.5 is Bobby Darrow.
You're gonna add that
Yeah.
request to join that committee?
Yep.
Okay.
So while we're still on this, just for the public's information, is there still an opportunity if someone is interested to contact you?
Certainly, and I will leave it to the discretion of the chair to determine the effectiveness of adding members beyond the 13 or 14 that are already on this committee. So, yeah, it's a big committee, but the chair is actually going to be breaking their charge into subsections and do almost subcommittee work, which gives them the opportunity to do that with those kind of numbers. Item 12.3, act on a recommendation to appoint Jennifer Rowe to the Housing Authority for a term to expire March 31st, 2024. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. 12.4, act on a recommendation to appoint Christy Faulkner as an alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire February 28th, 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. 12.5, appoint Bob Yarrow to the Guilford Safe Streets Task Force. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Item 13, 13.1, act on a request from the Soccer Club of Guilford to place a sign on the green advertising its soccer registration, sign placement 9/16 through 9/30. Is there a motion?
Make the motion.
And a second?
Second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. 13.2, act on a request from the Guilford Lakes Golf Course to place a sign on the green advertising its golf tournament taking place September 14th, 2019, sign placement 9/3 to 9/14. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Second, yes.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. 13.3, act on a request from the country school to place a sign on the green advertising its tours taking place August 5th to the 19th. Sign placement 8/5 to 8/19. Is there a motion for same?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Call the question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. 13.4, act on a request from the Agricultural Society to place a sign on the green advertising its fair taking place September 20th to 22nd, 2019. Sign placement 9/9 to 9/22. Is there a motion for same?
Make the motion.
And a
Second.
second. Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries. Item 13.5, act on a request from St. John's Episcopal Church to place a sign on the green advertising its Bluegrass Festival taking place August 24th, 2019. Is there
So
a
moved.
Second.
second? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
We have to re-invoke Gary's motion.
Put them all at once.
So waive them all? Okay.
Now waive them all,
Good.
make them one big one.
Make
Waive
one
the
one
individual
motion
reading.
for, okay. We'll do that next time, next month.
When we remember.
Just so the board is aware, we had received an additional application for use of the green by an organization that is, and it escapes me at this point, organization about opioid abuse that is focused on eliminating opioid abuse. Not unlike the one that we turned down a little while ago, it had an organization, and the requester was from Hartford. Good cause, but and also did not have the requisite insurance rider identifying the town of Guilford as an additional insurance. So that did not make it onto the agenda at this point. All right. Item 14, committee reports. Well, we got one from Lou, Sandy, and housing.
Yes, well, I think it's the same report I gave at the last meeting, but we had further questions for the two finalists, the not-for-profit developers that this board may engage to continue our affordable housing project on the Woodruff Road property, and those answers, I believe, have been submitted to George, and our committee is meeting next week to go over those answers and hopefully come up with a recommendation to bring forth to this board for one of those interested parties.
Good. Thank you. I don't think we have anything else at this point, right? And committee reports. Item 15, old business. Anybody have anything under old business?
Well, only two communications that I received. One was, I guess, an article regarding the post office hit the patch, and that was forwarded to me. What is the next step in that? I know we had one conversation or one meeting with the golf course folks. Is there a next step at this point?
Yes.
You said post office, did you mean golf course?
Yeah, you did say post office.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I meant golf course.
I don't see the connection.
Actually,
Wow.
We could bring up a whole thing about the post office too, but not, I mean, we're on the golf course right now.
I'm sorry.
That's all
Yes.
right, that's all right.
Yes.
Brian McGlone is attempting to schedule with the members of the Golf Course Commission. You can see some of the activities starting to take place. They're trying to raise money, they're having a golf tournament, et cetera. But I actually talked with Brittany Merles last week, and she and
I
Brian.
think that's what this
Yeah.
article was, basically a lot of your quotes and statements were in there, and I just,
Yeah, it's a work in progress, and
Okay.
Brian and Brittany Merles, as well as Chris Hodgson, are trying to get a time to convene to get back.
okay.
So-
Then the other conversation that, or communication I had was regarding the pump out boat that
Yep.
we used to donate some funds towards a Branford pump out, so that a pump out boat goes around to marinas and pumps out their tanks. And apparently we no longer do, but I guess Dennis Johnson has already responded in
Yep.
kind, and I will forward that information to
Want to?
anybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, it's interesting that we juxtaposed those two items, the golf course and the pump out thing. On the one hand, we're talking about not funding the golf course because it only serves a very narrow set of citizens. I think the same argument can be made on the boating side.
Well, we
of
do
things,
for
right?
tax, yeah.
And
People,
I-
so during budget time, everybody criticizes it, but, you
Yeah.
know, in the meantime, we're doing things for people.
Right, and I think, did you also all receive correspondence from George Page?
Yes.
Relative to the
Yes.
golf course?
Yes.
So anyone can feel free to respond to that. I'm going to take an opportunity to respond to him as well. I'll share that with everybody.
I just
He
thought-
raise some valid points.
Yeah, I thought he did too, so
Yeah.
as long as
Well, it's a
somebody
conversation we
responds.
wanted to have,
Right,
and
right.
I just don't want to, to have to wait the next budget
No.
to make some progress. Whatever the resolution is, that's why we have a golf course commission.
That's right.
And
I think it would be better if you respond for us, and then if there's something that we feel we need to add, we
Well,
can.
I'll tell you what, I'll draft a response. I'll share it with you guys if anybody objects to it or
Okay.
wants to change it. There's no pride in authorship, so I'm fine with
Great.
suggestions. I also had one correspondence, which I think I shared with all of you. The gentleman actually asked that could this item be minuted for discussion in the next Board of Selectmen's meeting, so we will cover it, and I'll read it for those in the audience. And it's from a Steve Drew at 50 Falcon Road here in Guilford, and it reads, "The Sachem's Head Peninsula has numerous areas where there is zero cell service. While this is inconvenient, it is also a safety hazard that the town of Guilford should address. My home at 50 Falcon Road almost never gets cell phone service, regardless of which carrier I attempt to use. I would like the town of Guilford to facilitate the installation of cell tower or pole that could cover Sachem's Head. Walden Hill is a high point in the area. There may be other areas that cell phone companies would be willing to rent access from the town of Guilford. Could this item be minuted for the discussion in the next Board of Selectmen's meeting? In an emergency where a landline is not available or working, the lack of cell phone coverage could mean the difference between life and death. Thanks, Steve Drew, 50 Falcon Road."
my understanding that Sachem's Head has some quasi-independence. as
They
well.
are a separate municipality, so.
But those additions that we did on the poles on the green, I wonder if one of the companies would be
Those,
interested.
those are the micro ones, they only extend 500 yards or something like that, that's probably,
But they
there'd be a
probably-
series of them they'd have to do.
Well, it's not that they don't have any service there, I guess it's just spotty, or I don't
Yeah,
really
I don't
know.
either. But there's a host of regulatory issues related to this,
Yeah.
not the least of which is
Didn't they
the
bury
Connecticut.
their power lines out there too, or
I think they
something?
did. Not the least of which is the Connecticut Siting Council has authorization over placement of any of this stuff. So I'll respond to Mr. Drew. It's an interesting concept, and certainly
Well,
certainly talk about it.
The reason why it might be worth pursuing is twofold. you know, serve the taxpayers. Maybe the town could weigh in and lend some of its horsepower to any of their efforts.
Sure.
And the other thing, isn't it an income source?
It potentially could be. It could be, but the town doesn't own any property there.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but we might be able to weigh in some of our horsepower to convince somebody to do it, whatever.
Yeah, and there potentially would be an opportunity for a private landowner to put a tower up and earn some money as well, so. But that's fraught with a series of siting council issues.
Nothing's easy.
Yeah, nothing's easy, that's right. All right, anything else under new business? Public forum? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, recusals, hearing none, motion carries.
Okay,
Thank you all.
Hey, Rasheen.